Hey, this is Dr. Kraus, and I just am going to present a brief presentation here on how we can use commentaries and understand what commentaries are a little bit better. Because in biblical interpretation, if you move on to be a little bit more ambitious in what you're doing, you're going to want to be able to use commentaries, but not all commentaries are the same. So we'll kind of trot through some of the categories here. So let's start out with what is a Bible commentary? I think there's some confusion about this. It varies a lot. The Erdman's Companion that we're using in class kind of has some commentary material in it, but I wouldn't really consider that to be a commentary because it leaves out a lot of uh, a lot of the text. It doesn't address everything. And on the other hand, you might have a really comprehensive study Bible. That's also a type of commentary because it has somebody's comments on the text. I think the danger, one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of study Bibles is that uh, a lot of new Christians especially tend to think that those comments are as authoritative as the text. I don't know what the text means, but this comment says this, and so that's what it means. And those comments are just written by people like me. I know, I mean, I've participated in that a little bit in myself, and you guys all know that I make mistakes. So what is a Bible commentary? Well, literally, it's comments by an author or maybe a committee, a group of authors concerning the text of a particular Bible book. That's what makes it a Bible commentary. There are commentaries on all kinds of books. There are commentaries on the writings of Plato. There are commentaries on most of the major literary productions, novels, Shakespeare. You could find commentaries on Shakespeare, but we're talking about Bible commentaries. So there are a lot of variations to this. Let me trot through a few of these. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here. I'm sitting as I'm recording this in my home office, and I'm working on this commentary that I have been for many years on the book of Revelation. And just to give you some perspective, these are the print copies of commentaries just on the book of Revelation that I have, and I counted them this morning. There's 46. I don't think I have all of them there because I've got a couple down in my office at the church and a couple in my other bookcase. Um, I have I have on Logos, my digital platform for Bible study. I also have a whole bunch of commentaries on the book of Revelation, and I was looking at this. I think the total is something like 47. I also have, I didn't try to take a picture, but I have another 10 or so that are just on Kindle. And Logos and Kindle don't like each other and don't talk to each other, so that's a different platform. But altogether, I probably have about 100 commentaries, and that's just on one Bible book. Now, that's one that I've been working on for a long time, so I've acquired these commentaries over the years. And I don't have nearly that many commentaries on any other book of the Bible. This is by far the one that I have the most. But I don't have all of them. I mean, there's another 100 commentaries that are pretty worthwhile commentaries on the book of Revelation that are out there that you could purchase, but I don't have those. So it seems enormous, and I want you to understand there are different types of commentaries, and it will help you if you want to dive into this area. First, I would say we type commentaries partly by the intended audience. Who is the author writing for? And just as an example, some of you have seen that commentary I wrote on or helped write on the book of John. One of the problems with that commentary series was they did not define who the intended author, the readers of this would be. And even in questioning them, and I could tell by reading some of the earlier ones, some were written at a graduate level, written for graduate students. Some were written for almost as devotional things for, the basic member of your church. And I decided, because it was on the book of John, and I've been teaching that for years, that I was going to write it on a freshman in college level, because that's where I had lived with that book for a long time. But the intended audience is important, and you kind of need to be able to get an idea of this. Let me give you some examples. Some are devotional commentaries. Devotional commentaries are written for church members that don't have a lot of background in the Bible, that are not interested in heavy duty study. They just want to read the Bible devotionally so that it can be of spiritual help to them. This would include commentaries that are written to be used in Bible studies. Sometimes a Bible study might have 13 weeks on a certain book, and the author is doing a type of commentary there. Example of this are the a little bit higher level, the life lesson commentaries that you can find that are written by Max Lucado. I would put in this category. Second, we have what I call preaching or homiletic commentaries. And again, the intended audience, who are these written for? Well, they're written by preachers for preachers. And you can read them too if you like sermons, but a lot of these are transcribed sermons of famous preachers. And I think the one we see the most today is John MacArthur, and he's preached on like every text in the Bible in his 200-year career. And so they've published most of those. He's had editors go in and enhance them and clean them up a little bit, but basically they're his sermons. So I've used John MacArthur material for sermons that I preach too, because he has good illustrations and sometimes gives you a good way of understanding how to preach the text. But preaching or homiletic commentaries. Third, what we might call application commentaries. And there's a series put out by InterVarsity Press called the NIV Application Commentary Series. And I use these a lot in the teaching that I do for Hope International University. They have really some good exegetical work and some background material, but there's always a section there's 8 or 10 pages in every section of the book on how do you apply this, what's an application in ministry. And there's some commentaries that's really what they're looking for. They're not that interested in what the text maybe meant to the original audience, but how you can apply it today. And then a fourth one, and we could list a bunch of other ones, I only have 4, or what I would call scholarly commentaries. An example would be a series called the Pillar Commentary Series. My teacher, Dr. Carson, wrote a volume on the book of John in that series that I used a lot. I think is probably still maybe the best commentary on the book of John out there. But as my title sort of indicates, these are commentaries written by scholars, sort of for scholars, and they will use original language. So in the Old Testament, they'll be dealing with the Hebrew text. In the New Testament, they'll be dealing with the Greek text, and sometimes not with any transliteration. You really have to know Greek in order to use some of these, or you have to know Hebrew to be able to read what they're talking about. So this is a very high level. I certainly have a number of these because this is the level that I'm really dealing with as I'm trying to write my commentary. So just a few more things. The format. There are commentaries that are verse by verse that try to go through and say something about every verse in the book that they're studying. There are other commentaries that are more chapter by chapter, so they'll maybe spend time on the really significant verses, but the ones that aren't quite as important, they'll either skip over completely or they'll just do in a general summary sort of thing. One of the things when I'm evaluating commentaries is I know where some of the really controversial passages are in most books, and so I'll look in the commentary and see if they have anything to say about that. If they skip it, then to me that's a pretty lightweight commentary, but chapter by chapter commentaries can be very helpful too. And then you get kind of thematic commentaries that aren't trying to be either chapter by chapter or even, and certainly not verse by verse, but they're what are the themes of this book, and so they walk through and do really a lot of exegesis, a lot of interpretation, but not in the systematic way that you would find with a verse by verse or chapter by chapter. So following the major themes of the author in a book. Another issue is whether they're in a series or whether they're an independent sort of freestanding commentary. Some commentaries are part of a larger series on the entire Bible, or maybe a series on the New Testament or a series on the Old Testament. And sometimes you might see this in a one-volume commentary. There's a big, massive size book. I have it here, but I'm not going to go get it for you to show you. Put out by some Church of Christ scholars called The Living Word. That it's like over 1,000 pages, and it's a big, big book. But they had a group of scholars that did a commentary on the entire Bible. They cover every chapter, not necessarily every verse, but they're pretty comprehensive. And so it's one big commentary on the entire Bible, written by many people. Sometimes these big series are by a single author. So like Matthew Henry's commentary, a very famous one. People use it a lot because it's available online for free. And but I don't use it very much. It depends on the King James Version of the Bible. It was written in the 1600s. It's way out of date. He has some good things to say once in a while, but man, we can do better than that. So the reason you see people referring to it so much is because it's free and it's available. But I think it's very difficult to think that somebody could write a commentary on every book, even of the New Testament. And when I've seen these, they tend to be uneven. Some are quite good, and then this person gets the idea, well, I need to write commentaries on the rest of the New Testament, and so they run through those, and not really the best content sometimes. So I think on these you can buy a volume here or there, and if you know what's going on, you would get the better volumes by that author. But sometimes they're by many authors. So again, I'm referring to that commentary I wrote on the Book of John in the College Press series. They had an author for every book in the New Testament, every book in the Old Testament. Now the kind of the exception to that would be that they might include the same person writing on Ephesians and Colossians, because those books are so similar and have so much similar content. Or they might have somebody write one commentary on 1st and 2nd Samuel because they go together. But these tend to be better in quality overall, but they can also be uneven because you can get some authors that are really worked hard. I mean, this is like their life work, and then others that have been done more hurriedly and are kind of lightweight. So what about perspective? Just as we finish this, all Bible commentaries are written from the author's unique perspective. There's no such thing as I'm going to write this without any bias or any presuppositions or pre-understandings. Let me give you some examples here. There might be a denominational perspective. So, for example, I have a number of commentaries, even on the Book of Revelation, written by Roman Catholic scholars. Okay, they can be really good scholars and understand Greek well and know the background of the text and really do good exegesis, but there are certain things that will come out, like if there's any issue having to do with the status of Mary, and this actually comes up in the Book of Revelation in chapter 12, I'm a little bit skeptical that I'm going to buy what they have to say about the worship of Mary, and especially in Revelation, that chapter 12, is used as the basis for the statement that Mary is the Queen of the universe. So I know that. So if I know it's a Roman Catholic scholar, I'm not surprised when I get to that, but I'm also not going to pay that much attention to it. Let me give you another example. I've got a commentary that I acquired recently from a Jewish scholar who teaches New Testament at a famous seminary, and she's written commentaries on some of the New Testament books. I happen to have one on the Book of Ephesians that she wrote, and I'm like, Okay, well, people have told me this is a really good commentary. I actually met her, and I have a signed copy of it. But I'm kind of like, how can you really, how can you really dig to the depths of the book of Ephesians if you're not a believer in Christ? I mean, technically, you might be very good in unraveling the meaning of sentences and whatever, but there's going to be a lack of a faith perspective, which brings me to my next one, the faith or commitment perspective. Some authors are very conservative and uh, very traditional in their views, and others not so much. So you might find authors that really are not as committed to Christianity as we might expect to be at Wildwood Christian Church, and yet they're writing commentaries, partly sometimes because they're really good authors. They're easy to read. They've got a lot of provocative things to say, and so they sell. But the faith perspective would not be what we would feel comfortable with. I think you can still learn from people like that. You just have to be aware of what's going on. And then, theological perspectives, millennial perspective. In the book of Revelation, I want to know for every commentary, what is their millennial perspective? Are they premillennial? Are they amillennial? Are they dodging the whole issue? I mean, I've got one by a guy who says he's pan-millennial, meaning he believes in all the millennial perspectives. Well, that's stupid. I mean, they can't all be right, so I have much more respect for somebody who's going to take a stand and try to help me understand that perspective. But theological perspectives are important here too. So even getting back to the denominational thing, if you get a commentary written by a person in a church that practices infant baptism, for example, that person, you've got to expect when he or she gets to the baptism uh, text that they're going to treat it according to their tradition. Don't be surprised. That doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with them, but these perspectives are important. And then kind of to wrap it all up, the authority of the Bible perspective. If you have a low or a lower view of the authority of the Bible, don't believe in the doctrine of inerrancy of the Bible, or even maybe a full inspiration of the Bible, well, that's going to come out pretty strongly. I have a couple commentaries by a really good British scholar from the 20th century named Barnabas Linders, but he really didn't have a strong faith and certainly didn't have much respect for the authority of the Bible, at least not as much as I do. And so I can read that, and he knows a lot, and I can learn a lot from him. I can understand how he's outlining the text and making sense out of it, but I would say it's pretty spiritually dry. It's dry. Not much about the Holy Spirit there. I don't feel like I get much to preach from reading his commentaries. So the authority of the Bible is really important in understanding this. So one last slide. Format availability. You can buy print copies. I tend to not buy print copies anymore. I get them digitally. I have literally a couple thousand books on Logos format now. You can just get online copies, whether you've paid for them or you. There are a lot of free resources, and we'll talk more about that in another class. But in the end, to some extent, you get what you pay for. So if you don't, you know, the freebies are free because nobody really wants to pay for those. And things like Henry's commentary is free, but I think you get what you pay for. So I just keep that in mind. And the people that put in a lot of work on writing commentaries, they deserve something for all that work. And so you kind of get what you pay for. Okay, thanks a lot. Hope this helped.